It's like, wow, this really works. And in kind of relatively short order, too. Some people go to their therapist for years and years and years, and it's like, is that working for you? Like, I mean, it's working for them. The nice thing about IFS is you're not dependent on the therapist's interpretation of making meaning of the story you're telling.
Right.
The therapist or the practitioner acts as a guide to
Right.
help you make meaning.
Yeah.
That there's this innate self that is present in all of us that when you can access that,
Yeah,
really has the answers that you need.
Welcome to the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change.
All right. I am so happy to be sitting down with my friend and colleague, Sam Curtis. And Sam is in Portland, Oregon. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, where I usually am recording from. And I've been waiting for this conversation for a long time. It's taken a while. It's taken a while to book Sam. He's a busy guy, but I finally got him in here. So anyway, I'll give a brief introduction. So Sam, I know him through the TRE world, which I'll explain here in a few minutes. But he's a longtime professional sound engineer with all kinds of tours and accolades behind him. He's worked with Michael Jackson and David Bowie, and studio television sound engineering recording. He's been deep in that industry, and we maybe we'll hear a little bit about how that fits into sort of the other later chapters of his life that we'll be talking about today. But I had the way I met Sam, and I'll tell my half of the story, Sam, you can share, is in 2017, there was an advanced TRE, kind of a special training that Dr. Berselli organized with others in Japan. And it was at a temple on a sort of a Buddhist mountain area called Koyasan, which is outside of Osaka. And so a bunch of us gathered there to basically participate in essentially a retreat, a TRE training and retreat, where we lived at the temple for a good week or something like that. But simultaneously, we were filming essentially sort of a documentary documenting that event with both Sam and his partner, or a partner doing the video work, both with professional backgrounds. And so we sort of toured together as a group, and Sam and Andrew Hinton were capturing a lot of the video and the audio along the way. Anyway, spending a week in Japan or 10 days in Japan in a training like that, luckily Sam and I became fast friends, along with a bunch of other people we met in that training, and we've stayed in touch since then in a bunch of ways, the TRE world and everything else. In terms of today's conversation, what I really wanted to do was just kind of hear Sam's story, because he has a very unique pathway towards what got him interested in nervous system work. He has a great way of explaining things about the polyvagal theory. He throws a few F-bombs around once in a while, so warning to anybody who might be sensitive to that. But to me, a very, very unique way of giving, shedding light on the polyvagal theory and tremoring. And then the other thing we have in common is through the IFS, internal family systems parts work, which for both Sam and myself has been something that we've learned and studied and gotten trained in over the last several years. And so we've been able to kind of connect about that shared piece of our therapeutic interests, so to speak. So anyway, so that's kind of what we're going to be covering in our conversation today. And Sam, I am so happy to finally be sitting down.
Yeah, same here. Thanks for having me in your world here. It's really a privilege.
what's a memory or two from Japan? What's when you think I can't help but smile when I think back on that trip. It was October of
Yeah,
2017. There's a lot of things that flash in my mind, but what about you? What stands out to you?
same. Man, I mean, what a treat to be able to firstly be invited to go to Japan and do my job, the thing that I feel pretty expert in,
Yeah,
to document it was kind of an experiment in many ways. I think David Baselli, the founder of TRE, was wanting to see if we got a group of people together in a monastic setting.
right,
How would that influence the experience and the practice of TRE, or tension releasing exercises?
right.
Um, and to be alongside a group of people who devoted their lives, I mean, the monastics, to peace and to studying in their own way how the nervous system uh, works, through their practice, was really profound, and something that I wasn't expecting in terms of my own experience.
Mm,
You know, just having that tranquility over an extended period of time, um, being in the practice, having my own tremor uh, experiences, really deepen my own connection to myself. You asked me about standout
mhm.
moments.
Yeah,
I think Koya-san, the Japanese culture talks a lot about energy, which, you know, for some and certainly for me, it's like, I don't know what that is. That's weird stuff. But there was a real felt sense of connection amongst a group of people and a deepening of a connection to myself. And I had this tremoring experience where I felt like I kind of disappeared into this world of particles, and I realized that I was just a being made of particles and connected to all things. And I definitely hadn't taken any drugs. The opposite, like sober as a judge. And that was profound. That kind of came out of nowhere.
right.
Um, so that was kind of, yeah, deep,
Yeah,
and unexpected. Um, what else was amazing? Just being in a culture that I'd been fascinated by but never really experienced.
sure.
The monks themselves were just so present and lovely human beings.
Mhm.
Connecting with them was amazing. And then, yeah, I think the bath culture was pretty interesting. Everywhere we went, there was like this different kind of bath
The
experience that you could
public
have.
baths, totally.
Yeah,
Heck
that
yeah.
was really cool too.
Onsen and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
um,
No, Western culture is lacking a good bath culture, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, we'll get into this in a bit, but that was very much a somatic experience, right? Like being in hot water and connecting with each other and chatting about things and reminiscing about what happened in the day.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of community building as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we should do a repeat of something like that.
Oh, it'd be great, wouldn't it?
It
Be
would be
nice to have
good.
another TRE
Something
retreat in
it
Japan.
would be good. It would be good. It would be
Yeah,
good. Um, yeah, well, can you share a little bit about your background? I can't even remember where you're from. I think you're from the UK, but maybe just tell tell us about your life and your path into sound engineering and
sure.
touring with the greats, and then but then somehow you got interested in nervous system work. So yeah, and I'll ask questions along the way, but yeah, share a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
feel free to jump in because I get excited about some of these things, and if there's any time you
Right,
want to stop me and ask questions, for sure.
right.
Um, I mean, my background goes back to the northwest of England. I grew up in Liverpool until about the age of 11, and then moved out to a town called Ormskirk in Lancashire, which is a market gardening town. As far as how I got into sound engineering, my grandfather was a pastor of a church, and conducted a choir, as well. And I was always around music, from as long as I can remember. My granddad played piano. as I said, he wrote songs. He arranged songs for the church. He arranged songs for the choir. Some of my earliest memories were sitting at the feet of my granddad while he was on the stage at the Liverpool Philharmonic Hall, conducting the choir, and I clearly was being introduced to sound mixing. That's what a conductor does, it balances the levels of the voices and the instruments, and looks after timing and texture. And so I had this kind of very early ear training that I wasn't even aware of.
Sure.
Began to play piano, later drums and guitar, and so it was this grounding in music that led me into sound engineering.
Yeah.
I followed a pretty academic path initially, and then around the age of 16, 17, my parents began to split up, which kind of disrupted my education. I wasn't really enthusiastic about pursuing super academic pathways. I think probably because my home life was being disrupted. I wasn't enthused to do that.
Yeah.
And so I started looking around for some other options, and one of the options was to go to Salford University College for a course in audio systems and sound recording. And that's where I was introduced to this idea of mixing sound for concerts or for performances. I actually played, as a young kid, I played percussion in like the state concert band, the Lancashire Students Concert Band. And so I knew a lot of musicians from the area. Some of them then went on to this Salford College, University College, and were on the jazz course. And I was over here on the sound course. And so they were like, hey, can you carry the speakers for our big band and set them up and like turn the mics on enough when we do solos? Like, sure, that sounds great. Because I knew half of them, we'd grown up with them.
Right.
And then they would go and play jazz gigs in Manchester, and they say, "Hey, can you come and like do the sound for us in these jazz gigs?" And I was like 17 at the time, so I was doing sound for big band and jazz gigs from an early age. So that's kind of how I got into being a sound engineer. It was kind of by default. I was never as good as a musician as my friends, and so like I was the one that was, interested in taking their guitars apart, or seeing if I could fix them, or sorting out the speakers in the concert venue to make it sound good. That's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah. What was like your first paid job, like after you trained?
Let me see. Well, my dad decided after him and my mom split up that he wanted to go to the States, to America.
Okay.
And he did a Fulbright exchange program. He was an educational psychologist. And he filled out this form. Do you want to go to an urban area, semi-urban, or rural? And he ticked the rural box. So we got sent to Brookfield, Missouri, which was a town of about 3,000 people.
Yep.
And I was culture shocked. I was like, what is going on here? Like,
wait, how old were you at that time?
Then I was 18.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So literally fresh out of school.
Right.
And I really didn't necessarily see myself fitting in that environment. I'd actually, through the Salford, the University College, at a trade show, I'd met somebody who was a manager of a studio in New York called the Hit Factory, because I was interested in being part of a sound recording studio.
Right.
And I went with my dad to Missouri, hoping that I could go back to New York and work for this studio. And I'd had an interview with this person in New York.
I see.
I'm missing parts of the story, but I didn't get the job in New York. I didn't have immigration papers to come and work for the top recording studio in New York. That wasn't happening.
Okay.
They very much wanted me to, that was kind of nice, but they're like, we legally can't employ you. That's just the way it goes. I was like, okay, well, there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on in Brookfield, Missouri. So, what's
Right.
nearby? And a friend of the mother of a friend of a cousin of a brother had somebody who worked in this music venue called the Blue Note in Columbia, Missouri, which was about 2 hours away, thereabouts, hour and a half.
Okay.
And that's the home of MU, Missouri University, and several other colleges in the town.
Right.
And so I went over there and said, "Hey, do you need any help with like the stage or the sound?" Like, actually, we're looking for somebody that can help us with that stuff. So I literally, at the age of 18, moved out from underneath my dad's wing and rented an apartment in the basement of a frat house for $100 a month. And
Hmm.
this is all to answer your question.
Yeah,
And
this is
then
great. I'm feeling answered. This is good. Yeah, yeah.
and then got a job as like a stagehand, if you will, in this
Okay.
performance venue, which was an old vaudeville theater picture house. So it had a
Right.
proscenium and a stage and a hemp fly loft. So the ropes were made of hemp to bring in the lighting trusses and to fly things and pieces of set.
Right.
So it was an amazing venue. It held about 1,000 people. The fire marshal would probably say about 750. And so I got paid, I think it was like $2.75 an hour or something like that to be a stagehand, and I would help the bands load in, and I learned about lights and I learned about
Right.
sound and stagecraft, and really was just immersed in it. And I didn't have anything else to do, so I just kind of lived there. I like to like rock climb and rollerblade at the time, so I would like climb all over the rigging and like just learned about everything in that really contained space.
Mm.
And they had all kinds of bands come through because it was the venue between St. Louis and Kansas City. And so, I mean, kind of bands that I worked with, I have these drum skins. I should show you sometime. I have one signed by Joan Baez, two Sam from Joan Baez, and it's like 1992. Got one from
Cool. Yeah.
Bo Diddley and another one from Chuck Berry and Johnny B. Bad Johnson all signed it, who's the Johnny B. Good of
Right.
Johnny
Right.
B.
Right.
Good.
Right. That's great.
And then this other guy, Clarence Gatemouth Brown, who's this kind of southern blues guy that plays the violin and makes his violin and guitar talk. Like it's just that kind of level of act that would come through. And I
Right.
was
Right.
just this wide-eyed white kid from England just going, wow, this is really cool. So there was all kinds of other acts, but it was a pretty special experience.
Nice.
So that was my first paying gig.
That was your first job. All right. Hey,
Yeah.
pretty good gig. Well, I think you did both studio work, but then didn't you do tour work as well, or what?
Mm-hmm.
How did things develop from there?
So from there, there was a punk rock band that lived in Brookfield, Missouri from California. It was the only other people 4 houses down from my dad's house I had anything in common with. The name of the band was called All. Their lineage, they came out of a band called The Descendants. They're a poppy punk rock band. Anybody that's listening that knows kind of early skate punk rock will know who The Descendants are. They came out of Black Flag, who are also like one of the seminal punk rock bands. Henry Rollins was in Black Flag. And after a year of working at this club, I go back and see my dad, and then I go around and see the band. After a year, they were like, "Hey, we're going on tour. You want to go on tour for 3.5 months around the States?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still 18. I got nothing else to do." And I took off on tour around the country, overstayed my welcome, almost got deported, still pops up on my immigration papers today. So I went off on tour with them, went back to England, started working in live sound, so working with big sound systems, worked for a company called Concert Systems, really learning about large scale sound systems. So I'm no longer in the club now, we're in like taking speakers to arenas, and it was at the time of the rave movement, so it was as many speakers as you could pack in, we're going to set up, and so I learned a lot about sound systems there. And after a wee while of that, I think now we're in 1995, 96, something like that. I had the opportunity to go to Switzerland to work in a recording studio in Montreux, which happened to be Queen's old studio.
Okay.
My boss was this guy, Dave Richards, who was Queen's producer and engineer in the second half of their time span. And I got to work. He did a lot of mixing. He mixed for people like Duran Duran, Chris Rea, Tears for Fears. And David Bowie actually happened to live down the street. He came in on Wednesdays, and so I got to work with David Bowie. I left Switzerland at one, mind blown,
Yeah.
Like, okay, so now I'm 21, something like that.
Right.
I turned 21 in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And I left there. There was some psycho-emotional experience that I had there as Dave, who was my boss, started to have some emotional things happen to him to where he couldn't, he had things he needed to deal with, and the studio became quite a toxic environment for me due to alcohol and being called at like 2 a.m. Hey, get the studio ready. I want to come down and mix all night. And, there was a lot of, he was drinking a lot, which made my experience quite negative.
Sure.
So I left. And then Dave calls me, hey, I'd been home for like a week. Hey, will you come back? Why? I got this client coming. I can't tell you who it is. I'll make it worth your while. I was like, okay. So I get there and he's like, yeah, Michael Jackson's coming in a week. And so we need to clear the studio and you're basically the point person because I can't handle it. I'll be up in my mountain retreat, I'm like, okay.
Oh my God. You're 21, 22, something like that?
21, yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's all of this technology coming from London. We got all these tape machines, the synthesizers coming from LA. There's an engineer coming from New York. And we completely transformed the studio. Michael Jackson's entourage arrived. He stays for, I think, over like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. He came in periodically.
Yeah.
And he was there to both record. I think he was getting some probably plastic surgery, and he's a big Peter Pan fan and also a Charlie Chaplin fan.
Okay.
And I mentioned Peter Pan because my theory is that he was trying to make himself look like Peter Pan. That's my personal theory with the
I think that
surgery.
holds some water. Yeah.
But he was there also to visit where my cousin Emma worked, she was working as a childcare person. Jeune fille au père is what it is in French. A nanny, that's the word I was looking.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
For Charlie Chaplin's grandkids.
Huh,
so
okay.
It was like this crazy fairy tale situation. On the weekend, I get to go to Charlie Chaplin's mansion and hang out with my cousin Emma and hang out there and then come back to this recording studio. And that's all like dreamy. Mm-hmm. But what happened to me was that I really learned how deep you can go with interconnections between studio equipment and how you can tie into different machines and where all of these wires go, which was pretty complex and pretty deep and really cool. And I also worked in the studio that sounded amazing. And it's been like my benchmark for how good can it sound.
Got it.
So that's kind of some of the positive things that came out of that.
Right. Yeah. Well, so fast forward. I don't know if you need to fast forward, but take us to, I think you had. I mean, I don't know if burnout is the right word, but
oh yeah,
but something about the lifestyle or something caught up with you at some point.
Yeah.
And then something led you to, get some support or learn about. Bring us into that.
Yeah. How do we tie trauma into sound recording and sound engineering? Yeah. So I ended up getting a job as a location sound recordist on a show called Gold Rush, which was a pilot show for Discovery Channel, which is a franchise now, 15 16 years later, it's still going.
Okay.
And it became Gold Rush's #1 show, Discovery's #1 show. And location sound recording is where you take a bunch of microphones and wireless microphones and you record the sound so that it makes sense to the camera. So I was working with film crews recording sound on a little bag of equipment in Alaska or in the Yukon in these really challenging environments. And the culture was pretty heavy on, we were working 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. By the end of about season 5, I was away from home that year, probably 7 months out of the year, which is a long time. And the way that we relaxed was we'd go drinking, and you multiply that by X amount of weeks. And I started to really lose perspective. I lost connection to myself. I didn't see my family a whole lot. My wife, I had a 5-year-old child at that point.
Right.
And things just got a bit too much.
Yeah.
There was one particular experience that I had in the Yukon in the winter, because by then we weren't just filming in the mining season, which was in summer. We were going up there year round and doing before the mining season and after the mining season. I was up in Dawson City in the Yukon, again, out drinking with some of the guys, and we're playing around, wrestling in the street. Next thing I know, I'm in a snowbank. And 2 guys who I'd never seen before, clean cut, were saying, "Hey, wake up. Where's your hotel?" And I was like, "It's just right there." And in the Yukon, they call them drunksicles, because it was like -20, -30. You don't last long in a snowbank at -20, -30.
Right.
So I got back to my hotel, woke up the next morning, and I distinctly remember just breaking down in the shower, crying, because I knew I was this close to maybe not seeing my family again.
Right.
And so it was a real wake-up call, and I had to really, when I got back from that trip, make some decisions. It was time to shape up. It was time to figure out what's going on and make some commitments to what was important. And that was, my wife and my child.
Yeah.
So that began this journey of what are you doing? What's going on? Why are you doing what you're doing? What's important? And I was feeling pretty ungrounded, as you can imagine, pretty disconnected. And I came home one day from wherever I was, and my wife's on the floor. Little bit of background: my wife's a body worker and nervous system health specialist. Kelly's amazing. I probably wouldn't be here if Kelly wasn't so amazing. Let's just underscore that. And she was on the ground, shaking around, kind of flopping like a fish a little bit. And I was like, "So what are you doing?" She's like, "The book's in the bedroom. Go read it." That was kind of my introduction to TRE.
Got it. Nice.
Yeah.
So
does that
did you go in the
question?
bedroom? Did you go in the bedroom and read it, or?
I thumbed through it. No, I totally did. Yeah, I read this thing, and Kelly was telling me about these experiences, and I was like, okay, I'll try it. In the back of the book, it's got these exercises, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. And I was like, oh, I've felt this before from rock climbing, when you're holding onto a hold too tight, and your arms start shaking. Oh, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, just keep going. It's a bit more than that. And I kind of came and went from it a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a couple more traumatic experiences. I hadn't stopped drinking by this point.
Yeah.
I'd stopped for a bit, and then something would happen, and I'd go on a bender or whatever.
Yeah.
Went one particular bender, and I came home. I was being an asshole to my wife, being an asshole to my kid. Next morning, I'm like, "What? What happened?" They were like, "Being an asshole." And so I was like, "Oh, shit. This isn't who I want to be. This isn't what I want to do. This isn't the dad I want to be. This isn't the husband I want to be.
Sure.
Let's stop. Let's stop what we're doing." And so I went full into the TRE. Like, okay, here we go. Let's go in. This is like probably round 3 of dipping my toe in the water and coming back out.
Right. I'm curious as to like what gave you the intuition or the instinct. I mean, because I guess because in my mind, you might potentially have gone. You might potentially have gone to see a psychotherapist or something. You might have said, "All right, it's time to start therapy," or "It's time to," like there could have been a number of things that might have been what you reached for. But you said it's time to dive into TRE and do it
Yeah.
seriously. What was your instinct or your intuition that was the thing you wanted to look at?
I'm cheap. No, there's an element of truth to that. Being self-employed, you don't have access to the traditional mental health care unless you're paying for health care that covers that. I had a high deductible thing. I was looking more for something that was self-help before I went and talked to a shrink.
Yep.
And there's a stigma around going and getting therapeutic care, right, from other people, especially as a guy, right? I'm this big, strong guy. I can take care of myself. There's an element of that.
Yep.
Kelly and I had been to some relationship counseling that I really liked the therapist very much. Mm-hmm. Probably some stuff of mine getting in the way, the pride too, without a doubt. Okay. But I was looking for something that could help me, that I could not be in control of, but some self-help.
That you could make it your journey. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, all right, I'll go full on with this. Let's see where it goes. If it doesn't work, we'll do something else.
I see. Yeah.
And I got into TRE.
What year is this approximately?
Probably 2015 ish.
Okay. Yep.
Somewhere in there. Like 2014, 15, it's a guess. And I got into it, and I started having these experiences where I was reminded of things that had happened in my childhood, or things that had happened out in the Yukon or in Alaska. Like, I had this whole thing around bears. I'd never been lower down on the food chain. I'd always been at the top of the food chain until I went to Alaska. And now I've got to watch my back, like with bear encounters. And at the time, it was a time when you were tethered to the camera, like with a cable. All the camera guy had to do was put the camera down and run. I had this pack of equipment. The joke is, you just have to be faster than the other guy. And I wasn't in a position. So I had really, like, it's funny, but it's not. I had these experiences where my life was under threat, and it was traumatic.
Yeah.
And there was some resolution around some of that stuff. During and after tremoring, I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about the bear anymore.
Yeah.
I had an experience when I was young where, as I said before, I grew up in this Christian household. Right. I had an experience with a boy when I was 10 that we were just being curious and fooling around, but there was no room in my life to say, I just had this intimate experience with the boy. How do I negotiate that? And culturally, I was told that's not acceptable. It's not all right to have had that kind of thing. There was no one to talk to. The only person I'd told about that in my whole life was Kelly. Pretty soon after, around before we got married.
Sure.
I wouldn't have been able to talk about that with anybody else. And I had this realization while tremoring and after tremoring, if I can love my friends who love boys, who are boys who love boys, if I can give them unconditional love, why can't I give it to myself?
Right.
What's happening there? And it was just like this freeing, like this weight just disappeared from my chest. Like, oh, I don't have to carry this anymore. I didn't even realize I'd been carrying this. I suppressed it, pushed it down, because in my family of origin, it wasn't okay to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I pushed it down because I didn't want to lose the connection. That's the Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Authenticity versus attachment.
Right.
And that was a living example of that.
Yeah.
And so to have had this transformative experience just from shaking around on the floor, letting my body do what it needed to do after
Yep.
some kind of traumatic event,
Mm.
and then having this freedom and this spaciousness that was then occurring was profound.
Mm.
So then the sound engineer in me was like, how does that work? What's going on there? Because
Right.
nothing in the media or the literature was saying, here's what you should do.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You don't see it going past on the bus. Hey, lie on the floor
Yeah.
and shake around. No, that doesn't
Right.
happen.
Right.
But
Right.
because I'm curious about integrated systems,
Right.
once I see a result, I want to go around the back of the equipment, take the back off the equipment, go, okay, that's connected to this. Okay, that's how that works. That's how this. So that
Yep.
was the birth of this curiosity that I had about the human nervous system, whereas I've come to
Got it.
understand it, the mammalian nervous system, and how we can transform our experiences and complete our traumatic experiences into something that is very positive. So that's how that started.
For you regular listeners to the podcast, you know that about half of these episodes focus on TRE, tension and trauma releasing exercises. And I wanted to make sure that you know about the Red Beard TRE certification program, our educational platform to certify others. And we have both an online version of that I teach, as well as an in-person version of the training that my colleague Ellen McKenzie teaches in Madison, Wisconsin. My next online certification training is beginning August 3rd and 4th, 2024. That's the first of 3 modules. And the way the certification program works is it's about a 10 to 12 month program divided into 3 phases of learning, each with a weekend connected to it, and then some one-on-one work with me and people on my team to support your learning journey. TRE has been a life-changing modality for myself. It's open to people with any background. I wanted to make sure you know about the program. You can find more information at redbeardtre.com. Yeah. Well, not only became you not only had a deep, your own personal experience with it that, but, then you trained. Then
Mm-hmm.
you was that a no-brainer? Here you're,
Mm.
busy guy still doing sound engineering work. Was it a no-brainer to go get certified or what was
It
that?
was kind of a thing that I was just fascinated by. It was like, what if instead of like trying to get more qualifications as a sound engineer, I could understand this system that I'm living in to a
Yep.
greater degree and maybe share it with other people so that more people can have this kind of freedom that I just experienced
Right.
for nothing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It didn't cost me anything beyond the cost of a book or maybe a
Right.
DVD or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think much stuff was on YouTube at the time.
Yeah.
And also it was a point of connection for Kelly and I, because Kelly also became a TRE provider. So it was something
Sure.
that we did together. Having
I
been
see.
apart, it was like this common interest that we suddenly both had. Some people go out for breakfast together on a Sunday morning. Kelly and I decided to dive into the human nervous system and trauma.
Yeah, yeah. Who did you guys train in Portland? Who did you train with?
Yeah, Jessica Schaefer
Oh, yeah, sure.
was our
Yeah.
trainer.
Yeah.
I think one of the most beautiful humans I've ever met.
Yeah.
Just in terms of being in touch with people's experiences and meeting people where they are,
Nice.
and really just imparted this demonstration of how to care and attend to the human being.
Right.
That it will always be part of my education.
Yeah. Hmm. Where did you who did you
Yes, in
take it?
Portland.
Yeah, yeah. So in those early, after you and Kelly trained, and I imagine she already had an established private practice. Uh,
Hmm.
who did you work with? You're kind of, freshly minted TRE person. Were you kind of sharing it with a lot of folks, or what? How did what?
I mean, my clientele, if you will, has just been slowly building because I've had to have this other career
Right.
to make money from. That's the sound engineering. I'm pretty good
Right.
at it, so I'm able to work at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
Um, my clientele is people who I work with, my friends, people that they know. My community really
Yeah.
has been the focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and for a while there was a kind of, we talked about it earlier, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like you just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, you want to like shake on the floor?" Like, well, you're a sound engineer. Why are you even asking me that? So I had to
Right.
kind of navigate some of that in myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, friends, colleagues,
Yeah.
my community, people that friends and colleagues know. Yeah.
Yeah. What I
Um,
remember, I don't remember the details, but during after Koyasan, I think it was when I first went to Colorado, so it was probably the first year of that pandemic.
mm,
Um, and I don't even think I ever followed up with you, but you were doing some sort of project that involved Esperanza Spalding, the musician.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in my memory, it included the nervous system. Maybe it even included TRE. What was that?
Well, through my sound engineering over COVID, I got contacted by a random agency that said, "Hey, can you drive out to this place and do a recording of this bass player?" Sure,
Okay.
just another gig. It
Yeah.
happened to be, as you mentioned, Esperanza Spalding, she's based in Portland. She's a
Okay.
multi Grammy winning bass player,
Yeah.
incredible musician,
Mm.
and we met out in Ty Valley, which is out east of Oregon, and she was kind of hosting a kind of retreat in some ways for some of her
Mm.
musician friends, bubbling with them
Mhm.
and exploring songwriting. And um, we ended up just hanging out, myself, Esperanza, and a friend of hers, Ganavia, and they had some other side projects. Esperanza was working with Harvard University on a songwriting project that was exploring how we can use music for healing. What's the
Okay.
intersection between music and healing?
Right.
And over a few conversations, I did another recording with Esperanza here in town for, I think it was the San Francisco Symphony um, project that was being offered. Um, and Esperanza said, "Hey, I'm wondering if you'd sit on this panel for my course in Harvard because of your sound engineering and your knowledge of production, but also your knowledge of the human nervous system." And
So, like, that had already come you mean that had come up in conversation with her, this nervous system stuff?
yeah, I think I told her some of the other stuff that I was doing, and that was like
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
We had this really cool conversation about how the nervous system works, and
Okay.
um, yeah, the point really for me was like, wow, here's this young black woman asking this white kid to come and be part of her circle, and I was deeply, deeply touched by that privilege.
Mhm.
Literally to the point of like I actually started crying. Like, really, you want me to help you? Like,
Mm,
okay, because
mm.
as I said, I had this kind of imposter feeling of like, but I'm this sound engineer and I'm trying to be a therapist as well. So this was like this convergence of being asked by this respected person to make a contribution for
Right.
these young musicians who are exploring something that I felt was actually really important.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
What did you did so, I'm assuming you did, and I don't know if we'll do it here. I mean, we've talked a lot about the polyvagal theory, but you've got your own style of explaining the polyvagal curve, and just, you've partly because you studied it deeply, but then you also kind of, in my mind, sort of found ways to make that accessible to people. So I'm picturing that Esperanza recognized that in you, that you were able to sort of communicate something about that.
Well, I
And so I'm
didn't. I didn't drop too many f-bombs with Esperanza. I was a little
okay,
bit more
good.
sensitive.
I
But
don't
is
even
that what
remember
you're
what the
alluding to?
F-bombs on the you made a graph at one point with, yeah, I don't the the fucking polyvagal thing. I don't remember exactly how it
Yeah,
worked, but
yeah.
anyway. But so is that part of what you were contributing to the panel, is sort of just knowledge about the autonomic nervous system? Did you
Yes.
end up tremoring with any of them or the musicians? I'm curious.
No, we didn't tremor. There
Yeah.
wasn't really the framework to do that. It's something I'd
Okay.
like to explore
Yeah.
with musicians.
Yeah.
Um, for your listeners who maybe aren't familiar, the polyvagal theory is a model that explains autonomic responses to stress and helps frame kind of a hierarchy of neural networks that are initiated when we greet some kind of stressor or have some kind of an event.
Right.
We used to have this old model of this kind of teeter-totter of like sympathetic versus parasympathetic, and we kind of realized that that kind of polarized way of looking at things isn't quite necessarily how the body works.
Right.
We tend to, in a most really balanced system, are in this grounded place where one set of neural networks are in place that help us rest and digest and heal and connect with one another. If something happens, what was that? We become oriented to the environment. We need to figure out whether we need to run away from it or run
Mm.
towards it. That's the fight
Mm.
or flight. And if that's not available, we tend to shut down or feign death or faint. And at the very extreme, we can actually pass out and in some
Mhm.
cases die. So
Right.
that's kind of the switching of that very basic autonomic response from this dual antagonism system, this balance system, to this hierarchical system.
Right.
And to answer your question, yes, that was part of what was that I helped people understand, is that when you introduce a stressor in music, whether it's intentional or not, you might actually be inviting a shift in the nervous system that wasn't intentional in your
Mm.
composition.
Right.
An example might be somebody left in the sustain pedal noise because they thought it added to the sense of the performance. And for many, that probably is the case.
Right.
But our ears and our systems are tuned to detect low frequency that doesn't have a regular pitch as a threat.
Right.
So if you're trying to create music that's healing and you've got something that's in there that's stimulating our system that is a threat,
Mm.
you're going to take my nervous system from one that is resting and relaxing and healing into
Right.
a place of potentially stimulated or even invite a shutdown response, which is
Sure.
counter to what that
The
composition
intention
is.
might be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So understanding autonomic responses can be useful in music.
Did that's so did the were the musicians, were they interested in that lens, thinking in those terms?
Yeah, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. There was
Yeah.
definitely because what would happen is there was a framework. It wasn't just me on the panel. There was music therapists. There was other music producers that were giving feedback on these compositions, and my feedback was very much framed through the lens of the nervous
Through the
system.
nervous system. Were the compositions explicitly was the focus of these compositions intentionally trying to be therapeutic in some way? Was that part of the theme?
Absolutely, it was like,
Okay.
okay, let's write. You write a piece of music, or what do you want to write about? Oh, music that would be useful for menstrual cramps, for
Ah.
example,
Oh,
or
interesting. Very
to bring
specific.
to bring somebody out of a depressed state,
Got
or
it.
to enhance connection between two people.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay. Interesting.
yeah, really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Has that project carried on, or did it sort of have its period of
Uh,
this?
I think over COVID, we did a few rounds
Yeah.
of this panel, um, and then as the world started to open up, I believe Esperanza also then started to pursue her more traditional career, which is recording and performing and going on tour. So I can't speak for her, but maybe her availability for as a professor at Harvard wasn't the
Might have
direction that she
shifted.
wanted to go in.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, sir, is there anything else you want to share about TRE in terms of, again, it's something as you continue to learn or as you worked with others? Is there a layer of the TRE experience that you feel like you haven't spoken to yet?
I think one of the other aspects of my varied and patchwork career has been as a snowboard instructor and coach. It's something that I've done in the winter now for 25 years or so. So I've become very connected to my body as I've gotten older and trying to understand how my body works and what the tissues are made up of.
Right.
And also with Kelly's interest in body work, realizing that we're made of this fabric, right? It's not necessarily a muscle or a tendon or a ligament. We're made of this fabric that creates different densities, and it's literally all connected. Some people call it fascia. Some people call it the extracellular network,
Matrix. Yeah.
matrix, interstitial tissue. And
Yeah.
within that is all of these sensors and all of these fibers that connect with pressure and heat. And you probably know better than I what they're different.
Yeah, the stretch reflex and all these different types of
So,
nerve receptors. Yep.
yeah, so I've been very interested in the actual structure. And this is maybe the sound engineer coming out again. What is it made of? How is it constructed? And we're talking about something that's tiny. It's smaller than cotton wool, and it all relates to itself.
Right.
And if you have a way of changing that composition in some way that changes the information going to the brain to say, actually, I'm safer,
right,
or I'm more connected, without having to go and speak to a therapist,
right,
or to shell out some money. That's what the beauty is of this tremor mechanism. We can reorient our whole entire structure to support ongoing positive outcomes. And I think that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
I just had ankle surgery, probably because of that 25 years of snowboarding and coaching.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I'd had general anesthetic. Never went under the knife before in my whole life.
Sure.
I've always been blessed with being pretty healthy.
Right.
Coming out of anesthetic, what happened to my body, do you think?
Yep.
My body starts shaking. Right? Yeah. I'd heard it being reported before, but I was experiencing it. And I recognized that mechanism. Oh yeah. My left side and my right side are talking to each other. They're reorienting. All of the fibers are reorganizing themselves. We talk about TRE as a completion of a stress response. I experienced my body completing a stress response after being put into a freeze state and disconnected. And now there was this reintegration mechanism. How wonderful would it be if, as part of surgery, we introduced people to their tremor mechanism so that they weren't freaked out when they came out of.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Or childbirth.
I'd be curious.
Any other situation.
Childbirth, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's another field that I'd be interested in is postpartum depression connected to a lack of reintegration in the body? We don't know.
Yeah.
Is the healing time post-surgery shorter, or is the healing more effective if the body tremors?
Right.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that anytime there's an autonomic response, it's supposed to be there for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I love bringing in that layer. Thank you. The fascia and and how it relates for you personally.
Yeah, I love that shit.
So let's talk about, can we talk about IFS, internal family systems?
Sure. Yeah.
Dick Schwartz, powerful work. It's having a moment. Boy, if there's ever been a psychotherapeutic modality that's crossed over into the public consciousness, successfully. It's probably every other podcast I look at these days has Richard Schwartz on the
Mm,
guest list. But and you and I, like, I think we, somewhat independently,
we
just
did.
next
Yeah.
thing I knew, you were enrolled in a training and I had just done mine, and so we hadn't talked too much about it. And then we connected in that circle, that group of men, following your
That's
training,
right.
which
Yeah.
which was so cool. So I got to hear a little bit about it, but I don't think I ever even knew, how that got on your radar with enough clarity that, it grabbed you
Sure.
enough that you wanted to get that IFS training. So take us on that journey a little bit.
Sure. I think the first time I heard of it was that's the classic Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score. He mentions it in there. He
Right, right.
mentions a few different modalities. I think that's probably one of our seminal works of the modern time.
Yeah,
I've certainly bought about 10 copies and given them away.
yeah,
That piqued my interest. I didn't really separate it out from any of the other modalities. Good friend of Kelly's, friend of my wife Kelly's, Jenny Heo, who, dear friend, who I deeply respect, had become certified in this new modality called IFS. It's like, oh, Jenny does good stuff. Maybe I should pay a bit more attention. And then from the TRE perspective, I was noticing that people were having these experiences to where they wanted to talk about something. They're having these realizations of, I don't know. This came up for me,
yeah,
and my interaction with them had to really stop at the body. Anything
yes,
that was psycho-emotional really was for somebody else to deal with, and that
sure.
didn't feel like a very complete service, if you will, to that individual.
Yeah,
And I didn't have any framework to go with to talk about that thing that was coming up.
yeah,
And professionally, there's something that says this might be outside of your scope of practice.
right.
Or if it was a friend, we'd maybe discuss it and explore it together.
Yeah,
But if it was somebody that was just kind of outside of that immediate friend circle where I can't be a friend to them, it's more
yes,
of a therapist role,
yeah,
my interaction with them stopped, and I didn't have any way to help them negotiate that. So I was like, maybe this IFS stuff is a good framework to help embrace whatever comes up
mm,
in an
mm,
individual.
right.
And so, as you said earlier, it's super popular, and you have to lottery in to a
Yeah,
training.
right.
So of course, Kelly and I both entered the lottery. I got picked, and Kelly didn't.
Yeah, yep,
And
yeah,
I mean, Kelly's got plenty of modalities that she can use to help heal people.
right,
Um,
right,
and she does it really well. It was really fortunate that I was able to participate in this training.
right,
And so I got certified in IFS I began in 2022 and my training completed January 23, I think it was. So
got it.
still relatively fresh, 18 months ago, thereabouts.
Yeah,
But it's been a really powerful modality to both share with people, but also for my own work as
yeah,
well, for my own personal journey. Um, I was finally introduced to a modality where I did actually trust the mechanism. I told
yeah.
you before, like Kelly and I went to see this
The
counselor of sorts,
couples person. Yeah,
couples
yeah, yeah.
therapy. I don't really like her. It was like, she made some assumptions about my English culture that weren't true, and I was like, "Who are you? See ya." You know? Sure, I was probably a little vulnerable at the time too.
Right, right,
But now I'm having gone to my own IFS therapist, and Kelly and I have gone to our own IFS couples therapist.
right.
It's like, wow, this really works, and in kind of relatively short order too. You
Mm,
know,
mhm.
um, some people go to their therapist for years and years and years, and it's like, is that working? Is that working for you? Like, I mean, it's working for them.
Right.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
the nice thing about IFS is you're not dependent on the therapist's interpretation of making meaning of the story you're telling.
Right.
Therapist or the practitioner acts as a guide to
Right.
help you make meaning.
Yeah.
That there's this innate self that is present in all of us that can, when you can access that,
Yeah.
really has the answers that you need.
Yeah. Yeah. No, to me, it's a, yeah, I mean, everything you're saying, I resonate with. There's just this effectiveness. I'm a few years into weaving it in on, on an every day, every week basis. And, but I'm still at that point in the learning curve where, I'm still amazed. I'm still amazed by, well, not only amazed, I'm still jazzed at just how useful of a tool it is. For me, what pulled me into it was actually, it was in somatic experiencing. So, I kind of had that tool as a way to be in dialogue, then and including both the nervous system and psycho-emotional content, kind of looking at it at the same time, sort of. But it just started bumping into some boundaries, and I heard enough about parts work through my wife, through Vanessa, who had embarked upon it before I had, and then I just started to realize that was sort of like a framing that was maybe going to open up some new doors, and in my mind, that's just proven itself in spades. I continue to be yeah, just so amazed at the how it makes intuitive sense to so many people. It's like they can get it
Mm-hmm.
pretty easily. Not only the fact that not only the idea of parts, like, oh yeah, well, I do have a part that's nervous about that, or I do have a part that is avoiding the situation, or so it is useful at the level of just sort of parsing or differentiating the just kind of the different impulses going on. Most situations have complexity to them. So it
Mm-hmm.
respects that complexity. But the other thing that I think resonates really intuitively for a lot of people is that whether they identify with the word self or not, it's a core concept of IFS, this idea of self energy or self. And as you say, the healing model is that each of us does have a viewpoint from which we can be spacious and compassionate and curious and be good listeners to ourselves and offer good sometimes offer support and healing. That's this funny thing that even within a person we have a lot to we have a lot of capacity to listen and to support, to nourish and encourage the different parts of ourselves. So it's this funny thing that doesn't even though it's a relational model, the relationship is you and your collection of fabulous and creative parts, and that's where sort of that healing work is. But anyway, to me, it continues to be magical. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious for you. What so with people with whom you're doing both TRE and parts work, how does that work? How does it reinforce one another? Yeah. I mean, I do it too, and I can.
I was just about to ask you the same question.
Oh, well, I'll answer. I mean, I'm happy. I'll answer the same thing, but let's hear your answer first. Yeah.
Well, I haven't had an experience with a client yet
Right.
where we've integrated both
Okay.
explicitly.
Okay.
And I'm genuinely curious, and that's one of those self words, is what if I did? Because if we're saying that tension and trauma releasing exercises help us take us out of those fight, flight, freeze responses and
Right.
into the part of our nervous system where we can really connect to who we are,
Right.
isn't that a great place to work from when it comes to IFS and working with the parts that might be anxious or angry or creating outcomes that aren't helpful for us in our life? So, and
Right.
I haven't gone there yet with
Yeah.
my clients, but it's certainly a framework that I'd like to try and figure out how to integrate, because I can see where there's
that connection.
that connection of those two things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good insight. And I'm not quite the engineering brain that you are, but I'm a little similar in the sense that it's like, how does one framework map onto another framework? And what I'm hearing you share right now is, the nervous system framework of TRE, this idea that, well, why are we doing this work? We're calming stress physiology, we're completing stress responses, and then hopefully returning to what we would think of as our physiological home base when there is safety. And from in that physiological place, it seems that psychologically we're also more connected with, because we're not worrying about threats, we're not in a stress response. It's easier to be in touch with, who we are as just sort of like an authentic person. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so kind of mapping that idea onto the concept of parts work, and in IFS parts work, our working method is, all right, well, we all have this self energy, and sometimes we have more of it, and sometimes we have less of it, that's available, but it doesn't really change. It's there. And it's a process that helps, um, cultivate that and then utilize it, put it to work with the parts of the system. And so your insight there, that using the physiological model, this down regulating, connecting, and that's probably kind of the same thing as saying, you could probably look at TRE as helping us get into the physiological state that's connected to having more access to self energy, and then that then is a place from which to, um, uh, be curious and
That might be
kind,
the jumping off point.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll answer your question, about the integration. I haven't. It's funny. I haven't. I definitely have worked with the same clients where we include them. What I haven't done yet is within the same session. It's not like we do TRE
Exactly. Yeah.
and then now we do that leads us into that hasn't been so common. For me, it's a little bit like, all right, well, maybe we're in a phase of our work where we're working at the nervous system level. And then, okay, we've gotten some good results, or maybe the person they're they love it and they're doing some independent practice, or they're going to classes or something. And you're right, maybe it has surfaced some, they're just, for a lot of people, they're, especially men, but not only men, but I'll go out on a limb and say that I have found lots of examples where a TRE journey leads one to suddenly becoming aware that there's more feelings there. There's more things to feel and to figure out exactly what is that feeling. And so I
Mm-hmm.
find that many people kind of like become more sensitive to their own emotional landscape once they've got, and that might's probably true for people who've started yoga or other embodied practices too. But I
Sure.
certainly see that with TRE. So I think what a lot of my work is, okay, that phase is going well, the nervous system phase, and there's curiosity around the psycho-emotional, the parts, getting clear about, the emotions that are coming up, and so then that's like another phase of work that we'll do. But
Yeah.
the one time that one area where I really like it when somebody has a parts perspective is I have some clients where each session we a little bit kind of like decide what's the right way to work today? Like, do we
Mm.
need to work with the nervous system? Is there a part that needs attention? Because they already know the parts language. We've already been doing that. And something that I like is that there's a certain kind of flexibility that I like, where um where the person can kind of feel into what's needed. And sometimes the person will say, all right, well, yeah, I've got a part. Um, you know, I'm feeling called towards TRE, and then we might ask the question, well, like, is it a part that actually is called towards that?
Right.
And oftentimes it is. They might even identify that it's a part that's in grief, for example, or maybe it's a part that is,
Sure.
anxious and upregulated over a conflict that has just happened. And
Mm-hmm.
and if and so sometimes we might spend 10, 15 minutes before tremoring, getting clear on from a parts perspective, is there a part that really would value that release via the tremoring process? Are there
Mhm.
any parts that don't wanna do that? In
Mm,
IFS, we're so often looking at, is there anybody are there any protectors who are nervous about this or that?
sure.
And what I've been finding is that by having a clear parts conversation as a preface to a
Mm,
tremoring session, it can sometimes, by the time we get down to the tremoring, in a way, the person knows exactly what it is why they're wanting to tremor, which part of their system has been curious about it, what's almost like the intention or what's trying to be served through this. And I find that that can be quite clarifying. So that's an integration that I've been playing with quite a bit.
right. So if I'm hearing you right, you're kind of saying, let's find the key intention or the key part that we want to focus on, and
Right.
then perhaps as we tremor, we're tremoring with that in mind or tremoring with that in body, and does that give the system more clarity around that particular thing? Which
Right,
it
and even to the point where while the tremoring is happening, like, you might take a pause or a rest or something, and you could, we can even continue the parts conversation. We could ask, how is that? There was a part that was really wanting this sort of release. How's that going? Is that part's needs being met? Are there any other parts that are having a concern, so we could even keep the parts framing in there during a session, and sometimes that's quite useful too.
that sounds fascinating to kind of have a circle there of
Yeah,
like checking in. It was you that really, well, you may know from any Zoom meetings we've been on. When I go off camera, I have these traffic lights that show up,
right.
um, which is that's from you. That's your choice points, which I believe comes more from like an SE kind of background.
Right, right.
Maybe it's at those choice points when the physiology is responding in a certain way that then we can visit this parts work because there's something there, and whether or not it's explicit.
No, no, I completely agree. I'd sort of forgotten a little bit about the choice points idea, but you're right, it's like that. It's like, a choice point just means that, you can ask yourself the question, hey, do I want to continue? Do I want to do more of something? Is it time to stop? Is it time to rest? You're sort of in a way self-reflecting and then determining, well, what's next? You're right. It's kind of like that, but then also taking a look from a parts model. All right, how's this going, everybody? Not just sort of the one unified consciousness making a choice, but hey, how are you gonna come to who's saying what,
What's
and make
present in the system,
what's
right?
present exactly. That's right. And forming agreements. One part might say, well, I really want to tremor every day the rest of this week, and then another part says, okay, well, we hear that, but that might not be the best idea. So you form a bit of a compromise or a working agreement.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
really. I don't know how many people are integrating IFS and TRE, but I can see a lovely Venn
a
diagram.
potential. Yeah,
Interesting. So,
yeah,
if anybody's out there with lots of money, we can get that pilot program going and
right.
do research.
Yeah, totally.
But in the
Yeah.
meantime, explore on our
Very much so. Well, so I always like to ask near the end of a conversation, like what's a leading edge for you, Sam? Like what's something you're thinking a lot about, or intentions on the horizon,
own.
or like what's kind of leading you forward in this work?
I think what we just talked about was finding that intersection between the physiology of stress and trauma and the psycho-emotional experience of these different protective mechanisms and how we can access
Yeah.
our true self and something that is really healing. Um, I'm super interested in where that can go in my own practice.
Yeah.
Um, as far as kind of next, the stuff that's in the future,
Yeah.
uh, Kelly and I are hoping to get some property that we can transform into a place where we can have workshops and retreats, and that's something that's kind of underway at the moment. Really looking forward to where that goes. It's a big leap of faith.
Cool. In Oregon?
It's actually over in Washington, just across
Okay.
the way. We're out in Goldendale, Washington.
Yeah.
We hope to be able to slowly build something out there that we can bring people into to.
Ooh, awesome. Well,
to help foster some healing in nature.
Right. Oh, awesome.
So,
let me know if you have to dig a trench or if you do anything grassroots, let me know. I'll come volunteer for.
Well, we might have you do both. We might have you do a shovel in the morning and then lead a workshop in the afternoon.
Yeah. Only if I get to do both. I want to be hands on.
Okay, you got it. And that said, realizing the importance of collaboration as we try and grow this. In some ways, it feels like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a frontier. Like we just had a unique conversation about an integration between IFS and TRE.
Right.
Body-based therapeutic interventions and the crossover of psycho-emotional interventions really is quite a frontier. I wrote down a list of all of the people that were kind of inspiring me in the work, and they were all pushing the edge. And so I hope to keep kind of trying to understand what that edge is and separating out the woo-woo from the this works.
Yeah.
Because there is quite a bit of like bullshit, for want of an expression. But I don't want to take anything away from anybody by saying something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's also the other side of that, which is, the scientific model, which was double-blind testing and all of those things. I hope that in the future there's a bit more resources available so that we can figure out why some of these things that are working, why they work.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the medical healthcare industry can get behind some of that stuff. Because my own experiences, it works. Some of my clients' experiences that it works, but the insurance companies aren't going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately the shackles that we're wearing. And what that means is that people that don't have access. I'd like to also make sure that the kind of therapeutic interventions that work can get into the hands of the people that have been traditionally marginalized. So very often, that's not the case.
Right.
And I'm talking about people who don't look like you or I.
Yeah.
That don't define ourselves in the same way as you and I do.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the next frontier, is making sure that we take care of everybody.
Yeah. Wow, Sam, this has been rich, inspiring. I learned a bunch of things about you that I didn't know. This felt really great. Thank you so much for taking this time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Alex. And thanks to you. You've been such a mentor to me and an inspiration. I look forward to more conversations.
I look forward to more years ahead in our friendship.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.